Hello everyone. It's yet another Creative Outlet Gaming Birthday Extravaganza podcast intro here. So we're going to be doing today one of the episodes that I was the most excited to do. In fact, it was the very first one I did. That's how excited I was for it. Because this year, 2021, is the 30th anniversary of the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, which, if you'll recall, going all the way back to episode number 1, that was the very first system that I ever played. I'm in college now. My father had a Super Nintendo when he was in college, so, I was born not too long after he had graduated. I would say, I think it was 5 years later, but that's really not that important. He still had that around, and that was where I would play a bunch of games. So I'm really excited to get in today and tell you all the typical pre-recorded topics that I have, but I also want to talk about some newsy items about the SNES. And in fact, they all kind of follow a theme that I noted, not to spoil my own podcast here, but when I talk about the futures of the future of the SNES, the big thing that I said is it's really not so much in official hands, it's in fan-made hands. So I have a few stories here focused on the SNES, whether it's about games, the system itself, teams, that a lot of folks in the community are working to improve the SNES, improve games, get games re-released that I want to tell you about. So, for example, the first story I have here pulled up on good old Nintendo Life is oh man, does it really, where does it say who is doing this? Oh, where is it? Here it is. Vitor Vilela. In fact, I don't think this is the only time that he gets mentioned. According to this article, he's fixing what is considered one of the biggest weaknesses of the SNES now. I don't know how true this is for me, because I don't think I own a... actually, no, I do own one of these games. But the SNES, like many older pieces of hardware, the NES included actually as well, is that there are plenty of games that are victim to slowdown. And one such game on here that I own is Super Mario World. Now, I can't recall where exactly the slowdown occurs in Super Mario World, but there is a video linked here particularly for this Project Fast ROM that Vilela is doing, focused on Super Castlevania 4. And apparently there's a stage in Super Castlevania 4, it's a pretty famous one, where Simon Belmont is traversing along this bridge that is getting destroyed, and the whole background is just rotating like a cylinder. I don't know the exact stage, but that stage in particular is victim to a lot of slowdown, because the CPU in the SNES is at 3.58 megahertz, right? So a lot of games wouldn't exactly reach that because they're using intense hardware, or they're using intense effects, right? So the CPU just couldn't keep up with the things that are happening on screen, hence the slowdown. So they would go to like 2 point some odd something megahertz. In fact, it cites here for Super Castlevania 4, it's 2.68 megahertz, even though the SNES should be able to do 3.58 megahertz. This is technical stuff that is above my pay grade to understand. But one way that Nintendo would get around this was with a technology that they just didn't have available for these games, just because they hadn't made the chip yet, called the SA1 chip, in long form called the Super Accelerator 1 chip, which had a separate processor, not unlike the Super FX chip, how it's basically another processor in the cartridge to do its 3D models that you see in like Star Fox and Stunt Race FX. But the SA1 greatly increased the processing speed of the SNES to blazing 10.74 megahertz, as well as some other technical capabilities. Faster RAM apparently is one of the big ones in there. So suppose, right, if you were able to, that you could go back and just pop this chip in an SNES cartridge for a game that runs pretty slowly, well, yeah, the game's going to run at the speed that it should be running at. And so now we have SNES games that are running constantly at their proper speed. And I think that is a fantastic change. Like I said, I don't have a ton of games that could benefit from this. The only one that I see listed is Super Mario World, so I'd be interested. Again, I don't know the areas where Super Mario World really slows down, but if those are pointed out, I would love to see a comparison between these. And hey, I would love to have a Super Mario World Definitive Edition with fast ROM enhancements in there to really make the game be everything that I want it to be. Similarly, Vilela has been working on adding widescreen support to Super Mario World, which I think is pretty darn neat. So, it doesn't do much on the map, but as you can imagine, in-game, that makes a world of difference. You can see so much further ahead. It's really, I feel like I never really had too many visibility issues in playing Super Mario World, but seeing what is this level that's in the Twitter video? Yeah, it has here. Butterbridge 1 is the stage. Seeing that in widescreen completely changes the game. I can only imagine like what the opposite experience would be like. What would it be like playing a game like New Super Mario Bros. Wii in 4x3 only? I think you can do that. In fact, I'm certain that's an option on the Wii's to play in 4x3, but it would be very weird doing that, right? What would New Super Mario Bros. U, which was made in widescreen only, be like shrunk to 4x3? That would probably make the game way harder, but, making Super Mario World be in 16:9 widescreen, not really necessary, but it certainly would make the game a lot easier and be more in line with its successors, its new super brethren, so to speak. And I appreciate it. Again, I love seeing... I talked about this, I think, in the Zelda intro. I love seeing enhancements to old games, to see new ways that they can be improved. Now, and again, with some very rare and minor exceptions like the Slippy mod. Again, I understand, I don't want to beat a dead horse there. It's good as far as I'm concerned, just for personal use, but I understand. I can see where Nintendo takes their legal position, even if it isn't necessarily an ethically correct position. But Vilela is not the only person working on these sorts of things. In fact, the team that made the SNES title, or at least just some of the members of the SNES game Terranigma, perhaps much more famous as a Super Famicom game and a European SNES game, one that never came out in the West, one of the Enix RPGs, wants to see a re-release of Terranigma, and I think that would be a fantastic thing. And like I said, it's one of the only games in this, or rather, the Quintet trilogy we got in North America. Illusion of Gaia and Soul Blazer, just not Terranigma. I don't think there's actually any formal connections between these games, but this is a game that members of the team are looking to see a revival of, and I think that would be fantastic. It could be a very new experience for someone like me who's never played it, or who doesn't play a ton of RPGs, but I've just heard really good things about it. Let's see. As far as other hacks, there is the hacker Mr. L314, so Mr. L314, who has restored the track editor for Super Mario Kart. So you can literally, on the SNES, in this effectively a program, the SFX DOS OS made on the SNES, basically turning the Super Nintendo into a PC, according to this little quote here. You can just build tracks for Super Mario Kart in the game, on console, which is genius. I mean, what better piece of hardware to build your game tools for than the thing that you're going to be running the final game on, right? Now, kind of like Super Mario Maker, apparently there's some other level editors in the game. I don't know exactly. That's all that the article says by Liam Doolin here, but you can make Super Mario Kart tracks, and that's pretty neat. I'm certain there are mods and fan games of Super Mario Kart out there with original track designs, but I would be really curious to see what sorts of new things can be made directly on the SNES to see what, how can you reimagine the tools used to make a level like Donut Plains 3 or Mario Circuit 2 or Rainbow Road and turned into these new weird creations that just give Super Mario Kart a little bit more of a revitalization, so to speak. As far as other news, there is that news that unfortunately one of the developers behind BSNES, actually no, I think it's a sole developer going by the name of Nier, has unfortunately, where is it here? This is a non-binary individual. I did not read the article far enough, my apologies. He was a victim of some bullying, some harassment, as you can imagine. Like I said, he was a non-binary individual that is one of many still existing marginalized groups on the planet. I have not read far enough here to see if what the cause of death was, whether it was suicide or any sort of thing. But regardless, it appears that this individual has passed away. Now, I don't know a ton about emulators, but it appears that... Okay, no, I can't read. Apparently, right at the top here, it says that this... developer has taken their own life, and that's just a shame. Not only because, of course, he was a brilliant person making considered one of the premier emulators. I've not used it, but I understand the impact that emulated devices have. In fact, I've used other emulators, particularly DS emulators, for my own personal purposes, so I know the value that they can hold. And it's just a shame to see someone who is so passionate, who wanted to push whatever the Super Nintendo could do, just end up killing themselves because some people just can't accept whatever identity this person chose to live their life as. And, I there's just a ton of tweets listed in this article, statements, comments. Even the folks on the CU podcast talked about Nier's passing here. So I just, my heart goes out to whoever, the folks around him, whoever he touched personally, whoever he touched through his emulator, so to speak. And it's just a shame that that's another person that's not going to be able to walk this earth again. I suppose that is a bit of a sad way to transition into the main topics. I think there was one other thing I wanted to cover here, but I don't think it's super important. It's basically, it's just a little thing that the individual who designed the North American version of the NES and the SNES has retired from Nintendo. One Lance Barr, so the SNES we got is thanks to him. All sorts of interesting, I guess it's all sorts of good creative SNES news here at the start, but a little bit of sad things as far as retirement and just the worst thing in the world, suicide and death for folks. So, but we are here, even regardless of these sad things, to celebrate the continued life of the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. It is what I think these folks would want us to do, since they clearly had passion for the projects that they worked on. So let us have a little talk about the SNES as pre-recorded by myself. As always, we're going to talk about an overview of the hardware, as well as many of the pieces of software that I was excited to play as a child. We're going to talk about what the future of the SNES could look like. I already kind of outlined it here in these news articles. That is clearly mostly fan work. And we have a little bit of a special topic, like we have in every single episode of the Creative Outlet Gaming Birthday Extravaganza series. Yet, for whatever reason, apparently I am struggling to remember what it is. So let me pull up my list. Yes, here it is. I've had an issue with the retro revival that's kind of happened over the years, which is it seemed in my perception, that you had an 8-bit retro revival with your Mega Man 9s and 10s and your Shovel Knights and all those games. And now there's like a Nintendo 64, PlayStation, GameCube, and Dreamcast era revival with games like A Hat in Time and even Super Mario Odyssey to an extent. So where the heck was the 16-bit retro revival? I posit this question in our special topic, and I come to an interesting bit of a conclusion on that, and that maybe there kind of was one, there kind of wasn't one, but it doesn't entirely matter. But I'll leave you to figure out why, or listen to why that is, as we transition into the original recording bits for this episode. So that's all I have for you today. Again, good news, bad news, but ultimately we're here to celebrate the Super Nintendo Entertainment System turning 30 years old, at least for those of us in North America. So please enjoy this little bit that I've already had recorded for you, folks.